What's up? My name is Alex Terranova. I am the host of the Dream Mason podcast. Welcome. We started this in 2017 because we wanted to highlight the journey of Dream Masons. There's a Dream Mason in all of us. A Dream Mason is someone who is awake to their dreams and driven by the passion, the purpose, and the desire to turn that dream into reality. We interview athletes, gold medalists, Super Bowl champions, artists, creatives, 8-9-figure entrepreneurs, spiritual leaders, and everyone in between. And sometimes we even walk them through challenges that they're currently facing. So depending on whether you're catching this as a regular interview or a playing with problems segment, there is something for you, whether you're at the peak of your journey, at the low point of your journey. I look forward to having you join me on this journey. And I hope that this show helps you unleash your inner Dream Mason. Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Playing with Problems. I am your host, Alex Terranova. I am recording this episode towards the end of the year. It's a middle of December, almost year's over. And I just spent about 45 minutes with our guest, getting to know her, connecting, and something that came up. I don't know if you know, if you've listened to any of my podcasts over the course of the last 5 years, I don't know if you know this, but I usually don't prep what I'm going to talk about at first. I really see what comes through and what I connect with. And the thing that I got really present to in just connecting with her was, as people who are driven and successful and motivated, we're constantly moving our end zone or our hoop or the track we run on, or however you want to measure it. It's constantly moving. So we achieve success and then we push it back further and we got to go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that I noticed where I am at the end of this year is I actually made a list of all my accomplishments and sent them to my coach. And my coach was like, wow, what an unbelievable year. And I'm like, yeah, it was all right. And I shared that with my fiance, Evan, also. And she was like, babe, what an incredible year you had. And I'm sitting here at my desk going, like, yeah, it was good, right? I can see all the accomplishments. Could have been better. I could have done this. I could have done that. And I'm just present to, first of all, that often is the journey of highly motivated, successful, or people, even just people that are passionate about living their life, right? However you determine that, and how that's great and how unserving it is, because we never actually get to stop and like celebrate ourselves and acknowledge ourselves for what we've done and feel proud of ourselves. So with that presence, I'm just taking a moment right now to acknowledge myself and feel proud of all I've done. And I encourage you, the listener, to, if you do an end of the year ritual, if you take a moment, which I also highly encourage, to take stock of how your year went. I often think of it as it's like game film. You know, if you don't watch the game that you performed in and look at where you made mistakes, how are you supposed to learn? Then you're just listening to what everybody else's thoughts are. But like, you take stock of your year, you acknowledge how you did, you appreciate it. You can look at what you can learn from it, how you can grow, and then you get to let it go and then move on. You don't need to like keep putting that game film in over and over again. You can let that thing go and move on. But when I pause and think about it, it has been a really great year. And I do feel really proud of myself. And it's really hard to say that and do that, because it's like, but that voice in your head is like, but you could have done more. You could have made more. You could have, been on social media less. And it's like, that voice is never going to go away. So I think we just got to ignore it. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Our guest is a retired professional basketball player, a TEDx speaker, a licensed clinical therapist. It keeps building, right? You're like, wait, if I had just said professional basketball player, TEDx speaker, you would have been like, oh, that's enough. But no, a licensed clinical therapist, an 11-year entrepreneur. She partnered with Microsoft and created a mental health app. And I think that mental health app is called Reach In Now, which is the big kind of journey she is currently on. But what I really enjoyed, I shared a moment ago that we talked for 45 minutes. What I really enjoyed about the conversation that we had in getting to know each other was that same feeling of, no matter how much she does, those kind of demons, that voices in your head still exist, which is rare that we get to be with people that actually are open and honest about that. we're often just with people and they're just telling us about all the things they've done. And they're just like piling on their wins to kind of hutch that voice. And she's really clear and honest about the experience she's still having internally, regardless of what the outside world produces. Uh, Bianca McCall, thank you for being here on the show.
Thank you so much, Alex. Thank you for the introduction and running through my resume, which I joke and say, yeah, it's longer than a holiday weekend. I got a lot of stuff that I do, but I'm so excited to be here and talking with you today. Thank you.
You have I said it to you when we were connecting, like there's a lot. And in a really, and it's not a lot of, I don't mean to this to sound like like I'm judging what people have done or not done, but it's just so diverse in the terms of you went from athlete to, athlete, education, mental health. Now you're in tech,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It it it's really it's expansive. It feels like you're on a journey to really experience like the bounds of which who you can be and what you can create.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Alex, I mentioned while we were talking before, I'm a very spiritual person, and not to be confused with high religiosity, but spiritual in the sense that I'm driven by purpose and how I define things and how I approach things. Even the language that I use, how I speak about things, is really driven by this sense of purpose that I have, and so all the things that I do very expansive, very diverse, and all spiritually driven in the sense that um, I'm really focused on my alignment, with the
Mhm.
universe and staying in the current of the universe and being very open to what I consider to be my higher power kind of guiding and directing, right? And the more aware that I am of the universal kind of laws and the occurrences or incidents that are happening within the universe, the more aware I am of it, um, the more, flexible I can be and I feel called to do different things. But I'm not on a journey to have experiences, but rather my lived experiences are almost guiding and dictating my journey.
Oh, that's beautifully said. So you you've had this unique journey, but as you just said, it's being guided like by the experiences. When you take stock and look at your life, in what ways do you feel like you're successful?
Gosh, I think at this point I feel successful because I experience like a majority of moments of just peacefulness and gratitude. And that hasn't always been the case. I used to be one of those people that I was going against the current of the universe, as I described it. And I was always experiencing conflict, whether that be with relationships or just circumstances. I feel like, gosh, why is this so difficult? Right. And I really was absent when I think back in retrospect, I was really absent of peace, right? Like I was constantly in conflict. I was constantly challenged, going against the grain, feeling different, feeling outside looking in on the world. Like I'm not accepted. I have no belonging, and I definitely went through those dark periods of time where I was just kind of like, why am I here? Or I don't want to be here if I can't understand why I'm here. And so a large part of me feeling successful today is that I have more moments of peace and everything. I'm grateful for everything. I'm grateful for all of it, even those parts of my journey that I described as being kind of dark and challenging. I'm grateful because without that stress and that pressure, right, in the same way that we look at matter, right, and the matter of carbon, without stress and pressure, we don't get the diamond. And so I believe I'm experiencing the diamond, in present day where I'm just beaming with being humble, being honored to be in the positions that I am and on the platforms like this. And I'm excited and I'm grateful and I'm at peace. I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
I love that. what do you are there any specific moments, achievements, things you've done that you feel really proud of yourself for?
Yeah, I was sharing with you before. I About a month ago, I was contacted by a manager for the Parisian fashion house Givenchy, and this was such a significant conversation because I've always been a huge fan of the fashion line. About 4 or 5 years ago, I it was the first time that I walked into the Givenchy store in Las Vegas, where I live, and and I saw something that I absolutely loved, and I felt like I absolutely have to have to go and then kind of flex at a basketball game where there were world champions and the best in the business on the court. Um, so fast forward 4 or 5 years later, I'm getting contacted by a manager and identified and recognized as, the sort of like VIP, clientele. Um, and really, for me, it felt like a celebration of a relationship that I built with Givenchy, that isn't based on kind of like the luxury brand and the clothing and spending a bunch of money on clothes, right? But the relationship was really based on they were such a huge part of me kind of like feeling comfortable in my own skin, which I think that's something that like a lot of us can relate to is like sometimes we're just not comfortable in our own skin that yeah, we're fractured as a human race. Yeah, we're divided as a people or different communities, but as a person, a lot of us are fractured as a person where there's different parts of ourselves that we beat up all the time or we hate, right? Or we strive to perform at this certain level. And we don't feel like we are reaching peak performance, that we're failing. A lot of us would use that language that we're failing at different parts of our lives. And so for me, um, Givenchy has been a part of this journey of really stopping that self kind of attack and that journey to self-love, right? Do things and maybe a little bit of retail therapy in there as well. But doing things to kind of self-love and receive this treatment like I'm some sort of celebrity or something, even though I battle with, that imposter syndrome and struggle sometimes with seeing myself as worthy, to be getting calls from Givenchy, right? And so that's my success story that I'd like to share today is I got a call inviting me to a private dinner for their VIP clients, black tie event. I got to get all dressed up, right? And in my Givenchy gear. And then I was also at that time nominated to attend the runway show in Paris, January 2023. And at the time I was nominated, he said, "Hey, send me some pictures, of you wearing Givenchy if you got them." And I'm like, "Bro, I got him. I got him." So I sent him pictures. I sent him some videos because what he didn't know was all of what I do for my life's work and my passion in the spaces of healthcare and behavioral health and really just being a good humanitarian. And so I sent him some videos of me doing outreach and speaking engagements and the TED Talks and things like that. And and once I was able to get introduced and my brand and my program Reach In Now was introduced, Givenchy then was moved to say, "Hey, we want to support the cause. Let's talk about how we could leverage this event that you've been invited to. How can we leverage this to help support and launch, your causes?" So yeah, announcing that, telling my friends and family, once we got past the questions of like, how much money do you spend there for them to be calling you like that, once we got past just the surface, like I said, like luxury brand clothing, sure, that's all fine and well. Once we got past that and we really saw the divine opportunity, um, this is by far the coolest thing that's ever happened to me, Alex, and it's made me feel successful.
I want to like put a little warning label on this for people that are listening. Just because you go spend a lot of money at a place does not mean this will happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just thinking like is Nike gonna call me at some point and want to support is Jordan brand gonna, if I think about like what would my brand be if it would be like Jordan brand or like John Varvatos.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you could spend a lot of money. That doesn't mean this is gonna happen, but I love that when we follow, you talked about following like your flow and following kind of uh knowing you're like in the right place and not fighting against like played a part in creating this.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Um, this in my journey has been completely special and unique, but it is the element of when you stay true to yourself. For me, kind of walking in this faith, like I'm going to continue to build and to spread the messages of healing and self-love, and I'm not only going to speak it, I'm going to walk that walk as well. And and I do believe, like a lot of people, they say like, how did this happen to you? Why did this happen? Does this happen to normal people? And my response, initially I'm just like, I know, right? This is like a fairy tale. But then I really just in meditation came to the conclusion that I am not normal. And that doesn't mean that I am not normal and therefore I'm better than other people. But the conclusion is I am not normal and neither are you. Neither is any of us, that when we are kind of walking in that purpose, that we all can recognize the incredible, power, the power of influence, the power of manifestation. We all recognize the power that we have within us and recognize we are not normal and we could all achieve unimaginable things, And like I said, it's not a measurement of whose life traumas or experiences are worse and not whose life achievements are better. That's not the point, right? The point is for us in our journey and where we are, being able to look back and see how far we've come, right? It's the progress, it's the process. And so living in a society where we're so performance driven and outcomes driven, right? We just look at like what can I get? Like is it Jordan? Is it Nike? Is it Givenchy? Like, no, those are just names, those are just very wealthy companies and people, right? That we're feeding the machine. It's all about our individual process and progress and being able to really identify what I call kind of the geography from where we started and where we are now.
I I I hear integrity, that the walk, right? The talking, the thinking, the speaking, like you're living in integrity that you, really spending it's not about how much you spent, but you spending the money on these things was actually speaking to you about like what you're worth and what you deserve. And then that plays out into how you show up. That I think sometimes we get confused, right? We'll buy things because we think they're going to make us feel better,
Yeah.
and they don't. But we could also buy things that remind us of who we are or help us show up in the world. One of the things I do is I often tattoo things on me that matter that I don't want to forget, and it feels good. It doesn't feel good when you're getting it, but it feels good to have it. But it doesn't actually provide anything. Nothing's different.
Yeah.
But when I look at that, it reminds me of who I am, who I say I am, and how I want to show up. And to me, that's no different than buying, a piece of clothing or whatever. But it flips the process. Instead of it being that thing's going to make me feel good, that thing is a representation of who I say I am or who I say I want to feel, and it like flexes it out into the world, basically.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, you know, happiness cannot be bought, right? Happiness has to be redefined for all of us, where happiness is actually an experience, And
Yeah,
so for me, with the Givenchy reference, that was an experience that I was feeding into and investing into. It was the experience of when I walked into the store rather than the kind of like pretty woman, example that I gave, like where it's like looking at me, like you can't afford anything that's in here. What are you doing here? You don't belong. Right. And just like how I felt, a lot of my life before where I just didn't belong. I'm outside on the world
yeah,
looking in. The experience that I had with Givenchy was very inclusive and it was very much You do belong. You would look great in this, and you would like this. You would like that. Let me form a connection, establish a connection with you to where I can share with you all of the ways that you are Givenchy, right? And so that was the experience that I was having, and me spending the money, during the times that I did. It was about feeding that experience, wanting to have more of those experiences where I was feeling, like it was closer how I viewed myself was closer to how the world was receiving me.
Hmm.
Because I think a lot of us, that's where a lot of our mental health, issues come from, those challenges like anxiety and stress and things like that. It's really because we view ourselves a certain way. We want to be here, but our interactions with the world and with other people are not supporting that, right? It's supporting a very different reality. And so that dissonance, what we call dissonance, or that separation in perception, that's what causes the stress and the anxiety. And that's what causes that drive. Like you said, the end zone keeps getting pushed out because we're like, we need to be more. We need to possess more in order to get in order to marry how I view myself, how I want to be viewed, and how I actually am viewed. Right.
So without diving into all of it, because we could do multiple podcasts on this,
Yeah.
I just want to tell people, you've overcome a lot. You shared with me, your journey as a basketball player was one of basically being on top of the world to losing it all and then fighting your way back and creating it. But that was marred with serious injury, addiction and OD from opiates that weren't it wasn't like a recreational thing. It was in using them to try to alleviate the pain and how so many people get addicted to them in the first place, not on purpose and not for fun. Um, and so the thing I just want to say that because one of the things that landed is like, hey, you've overcome already a lot. You've achieved a lot, whether it's about overcoming things or accomplishing things. And you're sitting in a great place now, right? You have these partnerships, you have this app. You just said you're happy, you're living what feels like your best life. Um, what's the thing that's challenging you now? What's the thing that you're running up against that you're struggling with?
You know, with all the successes, the biggest challenge is me, is myself. I mentioned that I tend to battle with um something called imposter syndrome, right? And it's that there's several different elements to imposter syndrome, but what I'm challenged with is that perfectionism, like everything. I had to go so hard in the paint, and especially being, I'm a woman, in a man's world. I'm a woman of color. I'm a woman who identifies with communities that are disenfranchised, that are, under attack in a lot of ways, right? Um, and so I've got a lot of odds stacked against me. And so I feel like I have this drive to just be perfect and to be 10 times better than my counterparts in order to get these opportunities. Um, but that's like an abusive relationship, right? With self when you're giving, 90% and you're only receiving 10%. And that 10% receipt is really kind of reinforcing
Yeah.
all the negative things, all that negative self-talk. I'm not good enough. I'm never going to be enough, never going to possess enough. So the greatest challenge is really me with perfectionism, and then also with feeling like I don't belong, in some spaces. And I think that the reason why this presents such a challenge for me is because what I'm trying to do, in for my life's work, is I'm trying to get the communities everywhere to shift paradigm in the ways that we talk about our mental health and wellness, in the ways that we treat and approach. I'm really going against the grain and tradition for how we treat injury, right? In sports, in healthcare, in addictions treatment, we isolate injury, we extract it, then we treat it in rehab, and then we throw it back into a body or into a community or to a household that hasn't really changed much, right? They've already identified us as the injurious agent, But in order to adapt into like a recovery mindset, we need resources. We need things to help support the entire system. But that doesn't exist, right? There's not enough, confident and competent people to support communities, right? Through our health and wellness. And there's so much stigma and shame around mental health. Uh, when I was a collegiate athlete and battling with some significant mental health challenges and conditions, the cultural rule was you don't talk about it. You just do your job. You play the game. It doesn't matter what's going on off the court. It doesn't matter what's going on internally. You need to fix that and play the game. You're obligated because so many people have sacrificed for you to be here. The name on the jersey, the name on the buildings, you're obligated. And I always speak to three cultural rules for athletes, for in Black, Indigenous, people of color communities, in military, law enforcement, healthcare, any service field. Same three cultural rules. It's integrity, above all else. And integrity is measured and defined by how much pain you're willing to endure and how much suffering you will suffer in silence, right? Excellence in everything that you do, which is confused with perfectionism, like I talked about the imposter syndrome. And then there's the service or performance before self, which comes at the sacrifice of self, right? You've got people that are pushing aside their challenges in order to perform. Because we all ask ourselves those questions. Will I be loved? Will I be accepted if I can't perform? Will somebody think that I'm a bad parent? Will I be able to get that promotion or get this job? Or will
Yeah.
will I be able to keep these people in my life? Like, hey, I'm in a relationship that I don't want to lose. Will they stay if I can't perform or please? Right. And so yeah, those are my challenges is how do I manage all of what's going on internally, with that, and then speak a message that's asking the entire world to change the way that they view themselves and the world and in between.
Yeah. Ooh, thanks for sharing that. Thanks for having, such a big vision of the impact you want to have, and also having a very grounded, sense of clarity about what's in the way for you. Um, you're unique in this conversation because a lot of the people I talk to do all sorts of things. Most of them are not trained in mental health
Yeah.
or right behavioral the way we behave. You know a lot more about why your brain does what it does.
Yeah.
So let's take a second really quick. So you need to close your eyes. Like we're not gonna take too much time because it wouldn't be that fun to listen to a podcast where people are just sitting here quietly. So I want you to take a deep breath or two. Just kind of like get into your body. And I would just love for you to imagine what or how it might look if you were free from all of these like binding agents that are kind of making it tougher. If you were free from the perfectionism, if you were free from the abusive relationship to self of always needing to be better, 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 if you're free from the not belonging, and if you were free from all those cultural things, the suffering and silence, the excellence, the service at the sacrifice of self, you were able to just show up as the love and the commitment you have for the world and yourself. What would what would how would you look? Not visually, but energetically, and what would be possible? And if you can kind of connect to that, I'm curious what comes up for you.
I think that what I would look like energetically is, instead of like how I said, my ideas of success is having several moments, a majority of moments of peace and gratitude and things. I think it would be all moments, of being peaceful and with gratitude, because I'm not perfect. Um, I'm faced with disappointments, with letdowns and things, and I have these moments where I kind of revert back to, like that freaking out and burn the house down, like burn everything. Um, but for me, if all of that, if I was relieved of all of that, I just see myself being like the super cool, like laid back, which I am that individual, but like all of the time, peaceful and just, gratitude. I see myself like in Colombia, on the beautiful beach and and I mean just connecting with people. That's what I love to do. That's where my source of love comes from is I love talking to people, and I've recognized recently that I have a particular affinity for talking with and connecting with young people, people that I could see there's an impact, to be made, and um, you could really redirect, a young person who's in crisis and doesn't even know it. Our young people have so much; they're under so much stress, and they're operating at crisis levels, but they don't label it or know it as crisis. So being able to help somebody out of that, to be able to do that freely, and the reason why I've just been kind of seeking the larger the platform to suit the message, is because to have as large of an impact as I'd like to have, it actually requires, and unfortunately requires, a lot of money, to have the impact, and money is a source of stress for me, you know. Um, so if I had all the confidence in the world and I felt like I belonged, I'm confident, I'm competent, I'm welcomed into these spaces. Um, I don't have to be perfect, so I'm accepted with my imperfections and all. Um, I feel like I'd be able to um, achieve whatever is necessary. Like I don't have like a specific amount, right? But like whatever's necessary to sustain this journey to be on the platform big enough for the message, if that makes sense.
Yeah, what I really heard you say was, and there were like these subtle pieces. For you said peace a lot of times. There'd be like
Yeah,
a peaceful kind of vibe to you and it. You also even brought in nature really subtly for a second, like,
yeah.
and even a specific place like Colombia, right? Like that, you could have said anything. Um, and then you spoke about connections, but specifically connection to youth. And then the thing that came to me while I was listening to you was the attitude that you had about, well, you said the piece about money, that money is a source of stress, but yet
Yeah.
you walk into a store and drop who knows however much on luxury clothing. Um, but not from a stress, like that could have been a stressful thing. Like, oh my God, can I afford this? But what I noticed about those stories is it wasn't. In those stories, there was like this experience. You were paying for an experience of yourself.
Yeah.
So what if nature, peace, connection with youth, and that experience of yourself that you would get through that way of relating to money?
Mhm.
What if that was all present and you were creating like what was next from that place? What might exist?
Wow. World peace? Um,
Like for you,
like
what might exist, right?
for
Yeah.
me yeah, for me, I'm gonna be honest with you, Alex, that that freaks me out a little bit. It stresses me out a little bit only
Mhm.
because, like I mentioned, at my core, being a competitor, being an athlete, I'm a little older and slower and heavier than I was, but I'm still an athlete at my core. Um, I you mentioned in the introduction, the end zone is always being pushed out, like think about a LeBron James who has had an immense amount of success in the National Basketball Association with championships and accolades and achievements. What drives LeBron James to literally a week after the parade, the championship parade, to get back into the gym and work towards wanting another championship, you know? Closers, champions, there's never like this, like you're saying, okay, even with this, you have all of that. What does that look like for you? It looks like me getting back into the gym and probably creating something else, creating another avenue, or going back to that space of meditation and asking the universe, what's next? What's the next current? Where am I called to next? And so it's hard for me to answer that question because I don't know. And I feel like I don't know because I haven't asked, not because it's not possible, but I haven't asked the universe that. I haven't asked my higher power that. And I fully intend on asking once I get to, that next level. Once I get the championship for this season, I fully intend on a week later getting back into the gym.
There's something that's like wonky or feels weird about the like I haven't asked
Yeah.
in the because you've shared with me how you feel so connected to spirit and you so flow with it. To not ask feels like there's a little bit of a disconnect.
Mm.
Even before, just to like see what, the messages you get. But also I wonder if the areas that you're being stopped are because you're operating from the same way you've always operated, right? The way that you've gotten success has worked really well.
Mhm.
But what you're playing for now is a whole different game. It's not just your success, right? When you're an athlete or you're getting your degrees or you're building these companies, that's like stuff you can do. But what you have shared with me is the thing now is like to get everyone else's buy-in.
Yeah.
And like you can't, it doesn't matter how hard you work, you can't make people believe anything.
Yeah.
If we think, if we think about this is any great spiritual leader, whether we believe them to be a divine nature or simply spiritual, like enlightened and spiritual leaders, Dalai Lamas, Jesus, Buddha, right? Whoever, any of these people, I wouldn't relate to them as hard workers,
Hmm.
right? We don't talk about how hard they work. They may have. I would say that Buddha sitting under a tree for however long was hard
Yeah.
work. I don't know that I could do that,
Yeah.
but we
Right.
don't think of it right like that. Um, and yet all the people like really gravitated over time. And it's the thing that got you there might not get you to the next place.
Yeah.
And so it just makes me curious about, hey, what would your higher power say in this conversation about what's next or helping you get to what's next?
Immediately what popped up for me when you were saying this, and so like who I look up to, same way like an athlete would look up to the best athlete in the space or that sport. I look up to, like, on my spiritual walk or journey, to Mother Teresa, right?
Yeah.
And the first thing that came up when you were talking is what my higher power would say in this next journey, because now I've asked, right? Is that they will come to me, right? Because so how I'm operating now, like you're saying, how I've typically operated is I've gone to people and I've tried to gather supports, whether that be emotional, spiritual, financial, material supports from everybody to sustain that travel, to go to people, to travel to schools and universities and speak and to connect with people and to touch people and to share this message and to get them on board. It's always me doing the travel, right? But then when you think about Buddha and Mother Teresa and all, people travel from all over the world, they come to them, right? And 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 it's there's a peacefulness in being instead of doing. So for me, the next step is to just be and not to do, because I am a doer. I'm an overachiever. I do. Workaholic, whatever you want to call it, right? But my next step is just being, solely being, and allowing these things to come to me.
I love that. And being, I would assume or assert that for you to switch from the doing mode to the being mode would take an enormous amount of trust and
Yes.
faith and like leaning back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's scary. Like when you talk about leaning back, it's kind of like trust fall is
Mhm.
what I visually saw, right? Like it is. It's scary for me. I'm not there yet, but I think that's where the journey is headed.
So if you could create some of the next steps in that journey with me now, what would how would you practice or start leaning into the more being versus doing? Or how might you? Because we don't necessarily know, right? It's all like practice.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are initial steps, like that I can certainly take. So to be honest with you, I mean, I listed off all of my jobs, some of which we didn't even mention, like on the recording session, but I have a lot of what I consider to be responsibilities and things. Like I wear a lot of hats. Um, and so my time management, I always tell people like I have two phones and I have one master calendar on what I consider to be my work phone. And without that calendar, if something ever happened to that phone, um, I'd I'd freak out, right? Because it tells me everything I have to do. So for me, initial steps towards the being is releasing some of those things that I feel like I have to do, you know, and taking some of those things, removing some of those things off my plate and being okay with that. Being okay saying no and being okay with saying no, not right now, and returning to that place of conversation with God or conversation, with the universe where I'm going to be led to only do what, is meant for me to do. And I'm not going to go out and seek things or commit to things, adding things to my plate. Um, and I'll tell you the source of this challenge for me has come from is because when I moved to Las Vegas, so I came here. It's actually a real fun story of how I ended up here, which I'll tell on another podcast. But when I came here, I recognized Las Vegas, Nevada, to be one of the most spiritual places on earth. And I've been to the Vatican in Rome, playing basketball in Italy. Been to the Vatican in Rome, been to these really spiritual places in Milan Cathedral, where the nails of Jesus, right, in the cathedral in Milan. Um, Vegas is the most spiritual place out of them all because so many people, it's so transient. So many people come here, and no matter where you come from or what your walk of life is, everybody kind of confronts their binaries, right? Whatever you want to say, they're demons, they're angels, good, bad, light, dark, and I've pretty much seen kind of the same thing for us all is like we could either be creative or destructive in a place like Vegas because Vegas supplies you with all of the means to do either one. It's a land of opportunity. It's so transient that you can literally connect with people from every corner, everywhere, every piece of land on this planet. You can connect with them in Vegas, right? You could understand the unique experiences, lived experiences of people from all over the world in a place like Vegas. So you can create business opportunities, housing market, like whatever. But you also have all the vices to be able to be completely destructive in a place like Vegas. And I won't go into that into that side, but so for me, I started to apply that to everything. Bianca, am I being creative or destructive? You know? And for me, being creative, I am a creative person. Being creative is creating these opportunities, building businesses, right? I become a serial entrepreneur. I create opportunities to build more relationships. And for relationships, it's give and take. So if I'm giving to all of these relationships, that's what adds things onto my plate. And that's what makes it difficult for me to say no to anybody. Because I'm like, oh, well, this is divine timing. You asked me this, I'm here. So there has to be divine, right? And yeah, let me just add, but in this shift of being rather than doing, um, I have to remove some of these things.
Yeah, I want to offer you something that I see for myself often, which is when we say we want something different, the divine will provide that.
Yeah,
It will also provide the thing of the old thing almost as like a test. I don't think of it as like it's testing us, but it's like the universe being like, you've always wanted this. Are you sure you don't want it anymore?
yeah,
And I don't even think of it as it's like being sinful, or it's kind of like really making you step powerfully in to the thing, that relationship that is so hard for us to walk away from. That person knows exactly what to say to get us to come back or to
yeah,
trigger us. And it's kind of like, hey, can you stick to your calling? And I think the same thing happens here when you're somebody like you. And I think a lot of the listeners, I know I'm like this. We really want to say yes to a lot of things. We want to create opportunities. Yes creates possibility.
yeah.
And if we say there's something big that we want, we ultimately have to create space for it.
Mhm.
Also, nothing can show up if there's not a space for it.
Yeah,
And I heard this the other day. Someone said, it's like breathing. You can't, if all you do is try to like inhale, you run out of space, right? And if you just inhale, you max out.
yeah,
It's the exhale that then creates the space for life to continue to go on. Um, and that's the like letting go, the freeing, the creating the space. And so it's like the saying yes, even though it occurs as like creating, can also be, to your point, like anything can be creative, anything can be destructive. Um, so without having to put things on blast, because I don't want you to do that, are there things you're clear on right now that, okay, I need to take that off my plate? Um, if there's not, I would just give it to you as like a practice to go away from this call and be like, hey, by the end of this week, I'm going to decide what am I going to let go of and how am I going to let go of it in the integrity that of the person I want to be.
yeah. Phew. Yeah, no, it's not clear to me right now because that's just a part of the unpacking is, like the cost, like weighing the cost benefit, right? And really for me, I think it takes kind of the silent meditation to
Mm,
really understand, what is for me, what
yeah,
is um necessary, for me to continue on this journey. I can't say that is clear to me in this moment, but certainly taking it as a practice,
I
you know.
love that though that you said that. I love that you got because you started in your head like, hey, weighing the cost,
Yeah,
which is it's just like all in the masculine, all in the like, the sport modality of like, right? Like when do I call a time? When do I use my timeouts? Do I shoot a three right now? Or would it be better based on the clock? Right.
yeah,
There's flow, but there's also a lot of strategy. And then what you step back into, which really feels like your center, which is the spiritual, which is not strategic. The
right,
spiritual strategy is irrelevant. It's right. It's the way knows the way.
yeah,
Stop blocking it. Right.
yeah.
And it might the most powerful divine messages are often the most illogical.
Mhm.
And that's what makes them right. We have to have faith and trust.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's I mean, what you just described, that is my battle, is, I'm a smart girl. I can intellectualize, overanalyze anything. But sometimes I think a lot of us we're like too smart for our own good, and we got to get out of our head and out of our own way, to experience, the divine or to experience what the universe is showing us. Because ultimately the signs are there, we have just learned to kind of just shut it out and think that we could intellectualize it and figure it out on our own. So So yeah, no, I appreciate you reflecting that back, back to me. And yeah, that is very much what I battle with every day, in making decisions. It's kind of like, left brain, right brain, spirit, ego, like,
Well, and you said it before yourself. Everything is either creative or destructive. And when you think about our minds, we think about our minds as logical, reasonable, but those same minds that we think about like that are the same minds that created all the weapons and have
yeah,
created all the wars, right? Because those all seemed logical and reasonable.
right.
But I would say if all of those people who did all those things and create all those things got into their hearts, not to say that we would never fight or right have, but that it would go very different. We wouldn't necessarily say, oh, I need to invent this weapon for protection. Maybe, right, which would seem very logical. Maybe I need to do something else to create it so that there is no danger or realize that there actually isn't danger,
Yeah.
right? That we're making up. This is kind of off, but I it just kind of came to me. I was in a stairwell the other day, big corporate building stairwell, and I was walking up the stairs to get um there's a basketball court actually on the third floor, and I wanted to see it. I'd never gone up there. And there's really nothing in this huge stairwell. And all of a sudden I get to the second floor and there's a little mouse. Like, right, this thing is like the size of my thumb with a tail.
Yeah.
And I am startled for a second because the floor moved, right? And then it's running around like it's going berserk. And I'm not gonna do anything to it. I just keep walking. I see it. It's just all
Yeah.
over the place. And I'm like, man, this thing is terrified, right? It's terrified. It's trying to figure out how to survive,
Mhm.
but there's no threat. It thinks I'm a threat.
Mhm.
But I'm over here. I know I'm not gonna kill it. I'm not even gonna tell anyone I saw a mouse in the thing. I'm zero threat. And as I'm walking back down the stairs, I see it again and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is us all the time. This is the human experience that we are making up threats constantly." Doesn't mean that there aren't sometimes threats, right? There might be someone that comes in there that actually tries to kill this mouse.
Yeah.
But that we're constantly seeing things and making up and deciding that it's a threat, whether it's the threat to leave something behind because of the fear of what we might lose, or the threat of our neighbor doing something, right? Or the threat of the way someone else looks or behaves. And then we get all worked up about that and drive ourselves into this frenzy instead of this mouse being able to like, this stairwell could have been its mansion, right? Living its dream. Um, what do you get anything for yourself in that share?
Yeah. I mean, I think I completely agree. I think, there are a lot of cases where I have a perceived threat or notion that I could be in danger or that there are negative energy or forces that are challenging um, me in that moment. I think it's important to recognize just for all of us that the impact of a perceived threat is the same as an actual threat. That and we were talking about this earlier. Um, that the brain is limited in that capacity, or we haven't yet unlocked the areas of our brain that
Sure.
will really make the distinction between perceived and actual threat. We currently respond the same. And, I think too, from an earlier part of our discussion, perceived threat we can be traumatized from a perceived threat and re-traumatized every time we see other incidents of that actual threat, happening to somebody who we relate to, somebody who looks like us or talks like us or lives like us. If they experience the actual threat, then that can intensify the perceived threat for ourselves. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Um, One for me being a Black woman and seeing the actual threat of Black people or community when they interact or engage with law enforcement, right? Intensifies my anxiety and the perceived threat that I experience when I engage with law enforcement. And not because I've done anything wrong, not because I'm not a criminal, I'm not, there's no reason, um, or I would say there's no actual threat that's in this physical reality. And so it may be hard for other people to understand, like, why would you be afraid of law enforcement when you haven't done anything, right?
Mm.
But just the example of, and with technology, what it does for us is it projects all of these threats going on, these actual threats going on around the world, and it intensifies, it projects fear into everybody, intensifies our perceived threat that something may be going on. And what's going on just really like neurobiologically, when we feel like we're threatened, our brain and our gut, it in our breathing and everything, it shuts us down and puts us into safe mode, kind of like a computer in safe mode,
Sure.
right? And so what we want to do, what we need, what we're going to do, what actions we're going to take, all of that is impaired decision making because we're in perceived threat. So when we're impaired, when we're in safe mode, we're like zombies, we're like robots, easily influenced. So that when you go back to how powerful are we as people, is we have such a powerful influence over not only ourselves, but other people, everybody who we interact with. And the other example that we spoke about earlier was why we see young people with increases in suicide deaths, increases in drug overdose, right? Deaths. Why are they so stressed? Why are they in crisis and not even knowing it? Because in their language, they're not thinking, oh, I'm in crisis. They're just thinking this is life, right? And they're the symptom and the sign of a problem with their larger system, right? School systems. Why does my student only care about getting an A and doesn't care about the process or the progress of learning, right? It's because the school system has this actual fear, right? This actual threat of it won't be funded. You won't be able to meet enrollment requirements. You'll have a lot of dissatisfied parents and communities. Your school may shut down if you don't perform at high levels. If your students aren't getting good grades, if they're not getting good scores on tests, if your sports programs aren't doing well. So the actual threat to the system is projected onto the students. And that's why students are so outcome and performance driven. Like, I just need the A, is because they're reacting the perceived threat from out of their perceived threat from the actual threats in the system. So I just mention all this because this is the relationship between like an individual or singular thing and a larger body. And so when we think about, like, when you ask me, how does that ring true for me? Is I'm just manifesting in my body, right? Off of actual threats from a larger body. And when you just kind of start to perceive how big this thing really goes, you know, it's hard. It's hard to tell the difference between perceived and actual, but the impact is equal.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for like explaining it and breaking it all down. And then I was still the place I think that I would still offer up or ask you to look is you no matter how we fall into all that, we still get a choice, right? The principal of the school still gets a choice of who they're going to be about that threat. If you get pulled over, you still get to make a decision, impaired or not impaired, right? Like you being, let's say, more impaired than me because I don't have that same, right? The perceived threat is different. You still get a choice on who you're going to be about the situation, right? You could take it, right? There's a million, right? And like this is a huge conversation, but I think the one, like Viktor Frankl's, um, right, that our only power is the moment between the thing that happens, the beat where we get to make a choice, and then how we respond.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about, I really appreciate that you described that. Yeah, we're impaired because I think that's the thing that people don't really notice is that when we are in a trauma situation or a situation that triggers things that we've seen or past, we don't have our full range of abilities available. And we could be like severely distorted in that.
Yeah.
And I think our goal, your and I's goal and the work you're doing is to how do we improve that? Right. So even though it exists, we can still keep doing a little bit better
Yeah.
so we can lead more of the lives we want to live and not be so in reaction to the things that happen to us.
Yeah.
So for you, what would be like one way that you can harness spirit and practice um, to lean into the thing that you want instead of responding to the perceived threats?
Yeah. Um, I love that you asked me this. I can't help but to want to externalize this first and work my way inward. Um, because it's an important point to acknowledge. I'm not saying that, justify behavior or anything like that, but to at least acknowledge that the decision point is challenged,
Yeah,
when
totally.
we are fearful and acting out of that perceived threat or trauma. Um, it's an important connection to make that. So how do we respond better?
Yeah,
I think externally, we could all wrap our minds around like the physical experience and how we physically train our bodies to be fit. Something else that we also talk about. We don't wait for an injury to go to a gym to work out, right? We go to the gym to prevent the injury from happening. So, in the same application, is we have to create kind of that muscle memory. So when you ask me internally, how do I spiritually respond and energetically respond? Is I have to create that memory, right? Because in the physical, it's muscle memory, but maybe it's the spiritual memory, maybe it's the emotional and mental memory of a favorable response to these types of situations. And the only way that I can create that memory is by daily practice, frequent, right? Frequency. It's that daily practice and activity and application to train. The same way we go to a gym and bodybuilders will do certain lifts or have a certain regimen to train their muscles to contract and to be presented in a certain way. We have to do the same thing spiritually, same thing emotionally, mentally. So for me, same things, right? I have to I have to practice being in spirit, right? Maybe that means more meditation, So as I remove something from my plate, don't just leave it as empty space saying, yeah, I'm leaving space for this greater, grander thing, but supplementing that space with what's going to create that memory so that I can consistently come here. So it's more meditation, right? A routine. Maybe it's yoga practice or, different activities where I'm practicing being connected to spirit, you know? Um, Same thing as far as like mental and emotional. And um, that's really the purpose behind Reach In Now. Like with the application is let's create a virtual platform where we could practice these courageous conversations and these healthy or mental fitness activities, right? So that when we are in these situations where it's either a perceived or actual threat, we're responding with what we know, what we have memory of doing. Um, so I love the question, and I think it speaks true to, I mean, just really at the centerpiece of what I do, who I am, what my philosophy is, what I believe is that we have to create a memory of it in order to reenact that because we are creatures of habit.
yeah, and I think it's so important to like the more traumatic the situation, the harder work that's going to be.
Oh yeah.
Right? If we've been through, you spoke about it from a racial perspective and uh, like systematic racism and this education perspective, which is a separate thing. That if we want it to be different, even just on a personal level, we have to do the work, and that if it's a really heightened traumatic situation, that it's going to be that much harder. That it's going to be that much more jarring. I mean, to imagine, you're trained as a therapist. I've done exercises with therapists where you have to go back and put yourself in those like traumatic situations and generate that energy and imagine doing something different. which for some people is could be really, really terrifying and really traumatizing,
Yeah.
uh, and really hard. And but I really appreciate you. Uh, I love the how you do. You're really reliable to go external and then internal. A lot of people will go external to deflect,
Yeah.
right? So then they don't have to actually look at themselves. But it's really cool to watch your process of going external and then working your way inward. Um, I haven't seen that too much, and it's really cool because you get both. You get all of it at one time. Um, I want to give you a moment. I want to just see if there's anything else that you feel like we can hit on in this conversation. Um, if there's anything else you need in this conversation.
I just I think I just want to say to your point of the more traumatic the experience, the more difficult this is, and having to revisit and refuel kind of that same energy. I That for me had kept me from doing the work for so many years because I just wasn't willing to revisit some of the just crap that I'd been through, you know? Wasn't willing to revisit the trauma. What I found helpful in my own journey and just something I want to share is that revisiting, it doesn't necessarily require refueling that same energy and being in that same place. But what I found is that simply acknowledging that this happened and through that acknowledgement, um, using empowering language to describe that, like I think that's where that choice comes in is making a conscious decision to use language that's empowering and that promotes a growth mindset that I'm not broken, damaged. I didn't commit anything. I didn't attempt to commit anything as though it's a crime or weakness to go through this stuff. I'm not, for me, I'm not a victim, victim and survivor. That was really important for me to shift out of victim mentality. But, but I learned that I didn't necessarily have to be in that moment in order to heal from it. That conscious decision to adopt empowering language and to simply acknowledge that this is something that's happened, um, I was able, to get to where I am now and successful in that sense. Um, and I just want to say that because I want to encourage people to do the work and to heal and don't be afraid of, being captured by that same energy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do people need to know about Reach In Now? What do they need to know and can they find out more about it?
They need to know everything. I'd love for people to visit our website. It's www.reachinnow.com. I'd love for people to visit the website. We've got a ton of information on there, ton of workflows to be able to help you, um, navigate through the information that's meant for you. um, you need to know that it's a mobile application. It's supported by a mobile application as well. That's available on the app stores and Google Play. Um, I am um, doing outreach to organizations and to groups and things like that, and going to corporate partners and these sorts of people that will sponsor schools and organizations. But um, at our release, we are offering it's basically free. There's no cost barrier to download and to help build the community. Um, there will be a subscription starting on March 1st of 2023. And so we're looking at, the first 90 days of the year, just building the community. Um, but it's a text and video chat platform. It's anonymous. And so we've got some augmented reality and things so that you can remain anonymous even with your video content that you create. But a text video chat platform, it's got content from retired and active performers in sports, music, arts, entertainment, subject matter experts, not just talking about mental health or doing the educational lab and lecture thing, but sharing their lived experiences. So more successful people that are sharing some of their challenges they've gone through or they're going through. and how they became kind of subject matter experts out of that. And then we've also got partnerships with federally funded programs with warm lines and text lines so that people can literally talk to somebody that has similar lived experiences with mental health and substance use disorder and things or challenges 24/7, 365. So it's perfect for in between sessions, in between work schedules, school
Mhm.
schedules, when real life happens. So we're really proud of and excited about the app because it's that alternative to social media that's toxic and dangerous. Now we've got a safe space to be able to process,
Mm.
not just the mental health thing. I spoke about that before. It's really like your virtual gym to go and just to practice. To create that memory, um, to be able to respond to things. And yeah, there's private chats, private group spaces and things. We do mental fitness challenges each week, where we're getting some kind of fun, cool stuff and engaging people. There's lots of like swag and tickets and donations from our corporate sponsors, that we give out for our mental fitness challenge winners. And it's just really kind of just this fun community that we're trying to build. And then I also go out and I do in-service and workshops and things like that. So all that information on the website. I really encourage you to visit me there and contact us if you have any questions or want to learn more.
Thanks. Thanks for sharing all that. We'll have all that in the show notes.
Nice.
Thank you for creating this space for people. It's needed, and things we have to be willing to try and adventure into new spaces because a lot of the spaces we currently have are not working for us. Simply
Yeah.
said. So, um, last question I have for you is what did you get out of this experience today?
I appreciate um, anytime that I'm able to receive, and I say that because I consider myself a very giving person. Giving time, energy, talking, speaking, and that sort of thing. But today, um, what I really appreciated was that you wanted to give me something. You had me doing some work. And so I think in any relationship, especially the one with self, but in any relationship, anytime we could have kind of a fair exchange of energy and enlightenment and education and information, um, it's awesome. So I really appreciate that about your platform, Alex. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for coming on and being vulnerable, being wise, bringing your heart, bringing your intellect alongside it. Yeah, and I really appreciate, I think that breakthrough, that moment of, I need to, that peace moment, like getting connected with spirit and let some things go is really powerful. I know I identify with that as is it's been the season of that for me. And I think that is very common among people that are up to a lot of things is it's like success hoarding almost.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, achievement hoarding. So thanks for being a great example of what it can look like, and it's in the whole paradigm of it. It was great to have you. Really
Thank you
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Everyone listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you want to be on this show, if you think you have a problem or a challenge or, just something that you're up to that you're not able, that you haven't been able to reach out to me, Alex at thedreammason.com, and we can talk about you being on this show. And if you think there's something in this for someone please share this episode with someone, subscribe, and we appreciate you and we will see you next time. Thanks for listening. Honestly, I'm just a rebel who found a cause and has a dream, and I'm super grateful for your support. If you got anything from this, please help me out and share this podcast with one person today. You can find me at thedreammason.com or at inspirationalalex on Instagram. You are a dream mason because your dreams don't build themselves.